Hey everybody, welcome to our Beating the Odds video series. I am Eric Waldo. I am the Executive Director of Michelle Obama's Reach Higher initiative. So I hope all of you online can give us the snaps from wherever you are and join me in welcoming Chair Westover and Dreama Gentry. We're so excited to have them on today.
I feel like rural America has had its fair share of misrepresentation in the media. A lot of times you see some more negative aspects of our communities highlighted. And I think that it's created a lot of false stereotypes and assumptions about those people who come from our areas. So do you think that there's existing stereotypes that create obstacles for rural students adjusting to college life? And what steps can students take to counter those false narratives and to create a more accurate representation of the communities that they call home? I mean, Tara was kind of talking about how an educated person is a curious person. And so I think there's going to be a lot of conversations between students kind of inquiring about each other's lives. So what steps do we need to take to make sure that we address any false narratives that they might have in their head and to better represent our community?
I mean, I think that there's a sense in which you can't do anything directly, right? What happens in other people's heads is the one thing you don't really get to control. And so there's a sense in which I think when people have ideas about you that are wrong, you have to let go of controlling that. And the only meaningful way you have to control it is how you behave and how you represent yourself. But I would say one thing you can do is make sure that you don't contribute to it. And I fell into this trap myself. I think I went to a university, and then I went to Cambridge, and I went to Harvard. And I think that there was a period where I kind of crossed over a bit. And I think I took the same view of where I was from as some of the people that I was meeting actually at Harvard and Cambridge. And when they would say, oh, this is what rural people are like, this is what they're ignorant, or they have these ideas, they're all like this. I either for reasons of insecurity or who knows why I did. But I think that there was a period of my life where I had a very immature, uncharitable and just kind of idiotic view of looking at my own town. And I had to grow past that, I think. And maybe, I think it took me a couple of years. I think I was around 25, 26 when I realized that I'd succumbed to that for whatever reason, probably insecurity and feeling like I needed to think that in order to fit into the new place that I was at. But it took me a little while to mature and say, these are stereotypes. And even if occasionally there's some truth to them, I really believe the worst thing about a person is not the truest thing about them. And just because you know one thing about a person does not mean you know everything about them. And I think that you have to continue to see that complexity in your community in order to make other people see it.
Two things. First is be yourself. And don't take the mantle on that you have to be the voice for rural America. You're Nellie, and let people know you. And you are from a rural place, and that's a part of you. But I don't think, I think it's too much of a burden. It's too much of it to ask rural students to be and carry the banner for rural, right? Be yourself and share who you are. I think the second piece of it is, my son's is going into his senior year of college, and what he did is, and he's an African-American student from rural America, is he really took the classes so he could learn the language, and he could talk about power, and he could talk about the history of place. So I would encourage you to take gender studies, African-American studies, place-based studies courses, take some of those sociology courses, because often folks in college won't listen to the argument from that emotional piece of like rural America is not like this and the personal qualitative story piece. But if you can talk about power and you can talk about infrastructure and you can talk about place in that way, you can move folks. So first, be yourself and don't let rural define you. Define for people what one rural experience is. And second, explore some courses so you can develop the language to have the dialogue, because we do need young people bringing that up and saying, not all rural people are the same, right? We're different, it's diverse.
So growing up in rural communities can often limit opportunities students have to explore career pathways and interests. What do you all think is the best way for these students to discover which career is best for them?
I would say if you have an opportunity to do internships, so look into the internship office on campus. Do it as a freshman, even though they may say you have to be a sophomore or you may have to wait to the summer to do an internship, but you need hands-on learning. Find the career development office when you get there as a freshman and say, look, I'm not sure about careers. I want to have opportunities. Often they'll have alumni that will do some coaching and shadowing programs with you, but find the folks on campus that can help you explore that. And then also sign up for some diverse classes. Take some classes. If you have an interest and there might be a spark there, take that class.
Don't pick a major too soon. If you know, then sure, go do that thing that you know. But if you don't know, don't force it prematurely. And it is completely okay to spend your first year or even your first 2 years taking general classes. It will not delay your graduation. It's very unlikely to. I don't think I picked my major. I studied history. I think it might have been the beginning of my junior year that I'd done all my generals and I'd done some extra generals because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And then I picked my major and I graduated comfortably on time. So you can take those 2 years. Again, I think it's one of the biggest differences between kids coming from a more privileged background and kids who don't, is that kids from a more financially higher socioeconomic status feel like they get to explore and they get to take those first 2 years and decide what they want to do. And too often, kids from other backgrounds, rural backgrounds or lower income, feel like they can't, and they feel like their education is something they really have to race through and do in the absolute most efficient way possible.
Coming from rural America, I know coming from Appalachia, we have grown up with a very specific tradition and culture. And as you said, for some students, even just going away to college can be a sort of defiance from that. And I know for me and some of the students I know, we're open to change, we're open to going places, but we're still concerned about our community and respecting where we come from and being able to help our hometown while also leaving and going to college and kind of almost defying our culture just by doing that. So how would you recommend balancing that for rural students?
Don't rush to an easy answer to that question. That's an incredibly complicated, difficult, rich thing for you to spend a couple decades thinking about in your life, So don't embrace some slogan type answer that just solves the problem and done and dusted. I don't have to worry about it anymore. The fact that you feel some discomfort or feel unsure where your loyalties are and who you are, who do you owe what, it's uncomfortable, but I think it's an important thing to be struggling with. And there are a few questions I think that are more worthy of being struggled with than that question. And you don't have to come from a rural area. You could come from an urban area. You could come from a lot of different places and still be struggling with that question. It's an incredibly important question. So don't rush to an easy answer. I would let yourself sit with it for a good long while. It's a difficult question.
Also in college, you start to question things you've been taught, values and different things. And so I think as you navigate, it really is remembering that the family and the community is the place that's your roots, right? I always talk about roots and wings. They give you roots, but we only give roots so that we can also have wings, is how I like to think about it, right? We want to, when I think of my children, I want to give them a foundation, but I want to give them opportunity. And so I think you have to become who you are, but communicate with your family and try to explain to them that you're changing. And if you change, it's not because of something you're thinking about them or the place, but it's really you're discovering you, and they're still going to be a part of you. But it's tough. It's really tough. And and I lost connection with a lot of my family during that process and that journey. But what I found was family usually comes back, right? And community is usually where you end up back. And so you may have to break apart before you can come back.